Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today we have another very important conversation on child development, and we are joined by a friend of mine. Her name is Stacy, a psychologist and an in-house counselor. Karibu sana, Stacy.
Asante sana. Hi everyone. Thank you, Halima, for having me. My name is Stacy Alugo. I am an in-house counselor with Cloud Factory and a clinical psychologist with Psychologist Consultancy. Today we'll be tackling a very interesting topic on child abuse, its impact, some prevention strategies, and some evidence-based interventions. So I hope we'll have fun.
Karibu sana sana to this show. We are honored to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for accepting this invitation.
Thank you so much.
So please just help us understand the role of psychologists in terms of ensuring healthy development and promoting healthy development of children.
Wonderful question. Generally, psychologists play a very vital role in the cognitive, the emotional, and the social development of children, particularly children who have gone through abuse. So psychologists' role is to provide evidence-based, trauma-focused therapeutic interventions in collaboration, of course, with social workers and their parents, just to ensure that the child is able to heal in a healthy manner and to also have the opportunity to just reach their full potential.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much. While interacting with children, what are the red flags that someone should be, on the lookout to see, to notice whether a child has been abused or not? What are the signs?
That's a very interesting question because the starting point would be collaboration, because for you to be as a psychologist, you see, you don't spend as much time with the child as maybe the parent or the social workers or other children around. So usually if a child has been abused, your ear should be on the ground. So whoever is bringing in the child for therapy, whether it's the social worker, you want to do what we call a collaborative interview to ask the social worker if they've noticed anything. So here you'll be asking the social worker, have you noticed any injuries? Have you noticed any change in behavior of this child? Is the child now more withdrawn than they used to be? Some children stop talking as much as they used to. So if you notice any severe change of behavior that can't be explained by that child's developmental stage. And what I mean there is, for example, an adolescent, it is expected that once in a while they will be withdrawn because they're going through puberty.
Yes.
But you see, if it's a normal chatty child and suddenly they're not talking, then there must be something.
That's a change.
Yes, if they have some certain injuries, or maybe they're not concentrating like they used to, they're not participating in activities. I think those would be the initial telltale signs that a child has gone through something.
So it has to start with collaboration.
Definitely.
It's a collaborative approach.
Definitely, because as a therapist, you're only with them 1-2 hours max in a week.
Okay.
So you want to ask the parent or the social worker or the siblings. They would be the first line of contact to know if the child has gone through something.
Thank you so much. Children generally who go through abuse, and anyone for that matter who goes through some form of abuse, goes through trauma,
Definitely.
And trauma weighs heavily on a person generally, whether adult or children. Just help us understand what trauma is and what is the impact of trauma on the social, cognitive, and mental well-being of children.
Let me start with trauma. So trauma, in layman's term, what I'd say, trauma is anything that, for lack of a better word, turns your life upside down. That's what I'd say what that trauma is. That, as human beings, we expect our lives to have waves. So usually a good analogy is your life is like a heartbeat. So the goal is not to be, it's never a flat line, because that means you're dead. So you want to be constantly going through ups and downs, through the waves, right? So what trauma essentially means that you've gone through a period where it's an extreme, which means
more than the
normal regular heartbeat. And in medical terms, you do know, if you know your heart is beating, then there is something wrong. So essentially, that's how you would view trauma, that you've gone through something that has stopped you from your normal way of functioning.
Interrupts your normal functioning.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in terms of cognitive, here you'd be, if you've gone through trauma, some of the things that would come up would be things like impaired concentration, particularly in children, impaired concentration. So you're trying to tell this child to do 1, 2, 3 things, or to engage in 1, 2, 3 things, but they're just not catching on, and maybe this was a child who could easily catch on. Memory problems, so you've sent them maybe even to the kitchen, for example, go and get me a cup, and they come back with a plate. That should tell you something. Learning challenges, that is inconsistent with their developmental stage. So if they're in a certain grade and you're seeing that they are struggling more than usual, again, the thing about trauma is they must have been a normal that is no longer the same.
So you compare.
You compare, because maybe the child just has a learning disability, which is also okay. You want to know, my child used to be like this, why they change, then that would be able to tell you. Another thing would be emotional development. So if the child is having difficulty regulating their emotions, so somebody who's always throwing tantrums, they're irritable, then that should tell you something happened, all right? Another one could be anxiety or fear. Fear is usually a very good telltale sign that a child has gone through trauma. So let's say they've been abused maybe by the house help, and every time the house help comes nearby, you can see that your child is at, they're not settled. That should tell you something happened there. Low self-esteem. And for children, trauma could be something as small as they were beaten maybe badly by the house help when they peed on themselves, right? So low self-esteem could be now they don't want to express, they won't tell you when they need to go to the toilet, so they're constantly peeing on themselves. Now they have to isolate from other kids or isolate from other family members because they associate going to the potty or the toilet with
some form of threat,
yes,
or
punishment, with severe punishment. All right. Another one would be now social development. Now here is where you want to be very keen, because if a child is not able to heal properly through a traumatic experience, then they carry it forward. So you see, we've talked about like low self-esteem. If we don't come and sit them down and correct that experience, and by correcting that experience is as simple as sitting the child down and saying, hey, when this thing that happened to you is not right. You're a child. If you do pee on yourself once in a while, it's okay. You just come and tell me, I'll go and change you, I'll clean you up, and then we try again the next day. That's a corrective experience. So the child learns that this first experience was the wrong one. All right? And
so
you
they're
want
able to do the right thing next.
moving, yeah, so that next time they know that if I pee, I'm not supposed to be punished. So that is what we call a corrective experience.
And also, depending on the way you correct a child, he or she will either continue doing the same wrong thing or change for the better.
Exactly. And you want them to change because they understand, and not because they are afraid.
Yes, because of punishment.
Because they'll be punished. Yeah, so you want to ensure that they know, moving forward, if this happens, an adult should not be beating me senselessly. And you see, if you don't correct that, they grow up thinking that's how it's supposed to be. So they live in fear. A child who's growing up in fear is not going to take risks. They're always going to hold themselves back.
Speak up.
They won't be speaking up. So you see now that you've already changed the course of life for that particular child. Yeah. So those are some of the things you're looking at in terms of red flags, just to know, has this child gone through something?
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, how can a psychologist help a child develop healthy coping skills to help them become resilient and overcome that phase of traumatic event that happened in their lives?
I think it ties into just what we were discussing earlier. Of course, one, when you bring a child for therapy, or if this is in a shelter setup, the therapist goes to the child, you want to build trust with the child, because children are very perceptive. So they can tell if this is a safe space and I can be myself, or this isn't. So what we usually do is practice trauma-informed therapy or trauma-focused therapy. Here what you're doing, you don't want to re-traumatize the child by asking them, tell me what happened. And even for children, a child comes, for example, and tells you, mom, I had a bad dream. Don't enforce and say, tell me about the bad dream, because now you're making that memory even more vivid, right? So what you want to do is give them an activity, because children again are not as much of talkers as adults. Give them an activity. Come with your Play-Doh, or come with your blocks, or come with a pen and paper, or some colors, and tell the child, hey, so and so, let's sit. Would you like us to do an activity? What's your favorite color? So you're trying to build rapport, and you're trying to build some sense of safety,
so that they can know this is a place where I can be myself and express myself the way I want.
Exactly. Correct. So once you do that, essentially as the therapist, what I'm looking out for is how is this child, communicating? How free do they feel? Are they afraid? So those are the things that I'm looking out for. But essentially, the child's allowed to be free. I ask them, whatever activity that they're doing, I do ask them to tell me about it as they go along. And the good thing about children is, as you are doing that activity, they'll tell you about it. They'll say, this is auntie, this is mommy, and you can even tell in terms of how they've spaced the people. If daddy is so far away, you ask those kind of questions. Why is daddy so far away? All right. So the first thing you want to do is build rapport and create that sense of safety. That's the first thing to helping a child to start to win their trust. Then after that, you want to, because there's nothing as bad as creating that sense of safety and then leaving that child in that situation. Once you've identified that there is something happening, either the child is being abused at home or in the shelter or whatever, your role as a therapist is to advocate for the child, particularly a child therapist, is to advocate for the child. So if I find out that the child has said, like, auntie has been treating me like this, the second thing in creating safety or helping the child build resilience is to inform the parents so that they're able to
take action.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, when you're building the resilient skills for children, it's not the same as an adult, because a child is very helpless, right? So you want to create an enabling environment, essentially.
To even help them express themselves in matters affecting them without fear.
Yes. So I think those would be the very first steps. One, creating rapport so that the child knows they can always come to you. Through advocating for them, whether it's with the the leads or the management of that shelter or the parents or the children office and things like that. Then lastly, when it comes to the child, is to help them put together a list of who they consider their safe persons. And that's a very simple thing.
Strengthening the safety net, right?
Exactly. So it's just as simple as asking them, write for me, if you are to fall down, write for me who is the first person you'd go and tell and why. As simple as that. So you'll see kids will tell you, I'll go and tell mommy because mommy always takes care of everyone.
Let me ask you a question. So that will help them know better the people that they can run to in case of anything, any danger?
Yes, one. And two, you're also bringing into their consciousness that when something bad happens, I should report.
And I have people that I can run to.
And I have people I can tell. So once they're aware of that, because they'll associate that if I fall, if I can tell mommy or I can tell daddy. So if something bad happens to me, I can tell mommy, I can tell daddy, or I can tell this and this social worker and things like that. And usually children know. Even in the shelters, you'll ask them,
children are very smart.
Very smart. Who's your favorite social worker? They'll tell you, okay, when something happens to me in the shelter, yes, I'll tell auntie this, auntie that, auntie this. So once they've written that list, you again now enforce and you tell them, okay, this is a very good list. Why do you like auntie so and so? Or why do you like mommy? Or and they're able to expound more. So the more they're doing this, as a child, they are learning. Yes, they're internalizing that, oh yes, indeed, I do have people I can go to. So now when something else happens, so now when you're bringing them back to the session and tell them, now that you've written this thing, is there anything that you'd like to go and tell mommy today? Right? Do you want to tell them about what we've talked about today? And things like that. So you're now creating that space to even foster, that these are safe spaces you can go to. So that would be the...
It's more of helping them know they have people they can run to without fear,
Yes.
and know that their issues will be heard
Exactly.
and tackled. How do you approach working with families in case where you find that a child has been abused within the same family? How can a psychologist approach such an issue when helping this child recover and bringing family in the therapeutic process?
That's a very tough but very interesting question. I think the first thing to take into consideration is the culture that you're working with. I do know we have quite a number of cultures where an uncle abuses a child, then a cow or a goat is sent, and that story
Kangaroo
is already
form of kangaroo court.
Yes, and that story is quashed. So of course, at the end of the day, the role of a psychologist is not to further divide or to come and insert what your perception of what is correct into the situation, because you never want to remove a child from a family setup to take them into, let's say,
An
institution, unless you absolutely have to, or unless it's in the best interest of the child, right? So in such cases, usually you pull in all the invested parties, and here you want to work with the children's department, you want to work with a trusted elder, if it's maybe that's the kind of culture that you're in or environment that you're in, you want to work with the parents of this child. Sometimes the parents are not what is best for the child, especially if the parents are enablers, and that is why you want to involve as many people as possible, because it's really true what they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes.
Okay, so in the therapeutic here, the role, the psychologist will not just be somebody assisting the child. Here you will be playing the role of a mediator, so to speak, an advocate and a mediator.
Because it's within the family.
It's within the family, all right? So we say maybe it's an uncle who has abused the child. Maybe this uncle stays within that family setup. Of course, you're not going to bring the uncle where the child is, but when you're having those discussions, is to ask the parents that this is what has happened. These two people, the child and the uncle, cannot continue to be under the same roof. So what strategies can we put in place to create a sense of safety for this child? All right. So once the physical space is taken care of, that the child, you've agreed with the elders and whatever, that this uncle will no longer, have direct contact with this child.
For the child's safety.
For the child's safety. Once you move from the physical, you want to move to now the mental and the emotional well-being. Again, now is where the therapist would come in very strongly. Here it's now again advocating and telling the parents that this child needs to be taken care of or to be worked with until they heal from this particular abuse. Can you commit to bringing in them more for their therapy sessions and also to be part of the process to know how you can support them at home?
So Stacey, what will be your overall recommendation to our viewers as a psychologist when it comes to protecting children and keeping them safe?
Okay. I think for the community or for the society, the first thing would definitely be to raise awareness, encouraging open conversations, providing resources for counseling, advocating for child protection policies. I think that's the key role that psychologists can push the society to do, just to ensure that everywhere you turn, that people are aware that this is something we can openly talk about. And at the end of the day, it is our sole responsibilities as the next up generation to support the younger or the upcoming generation, because these indeed are our younger
future,
citizens,
you know?
yes, they're the future. So let's talk about it. Let's keep the channels open and talk about it and encourage reporting and just be at the forefront in taking care of our little ones.
Thank you so much, Stacey. That was such an eye-opening conversation we have had. You have let us in the world of a psychologist when it comes to child protection. We appreciate your presence today. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Halima, for having me. Thank you, viewers. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, kindly hit the subscribe button down there. Like if you enjoyed this episode. It is free to subscribe and to like. And thank you so much for staying tuned for another important and interesting episode.